Okay. So I just want to welcome everybody quickly. My name is Daphne Lazar-Price, and I'm the Executive Director of JOFA in North America. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here briefly just to welcome everybody, to thank Nomi for this outstanding Herculean effort of building, of dreaming and building and launching JOFA Australia. Really having had the opportunity to work closely with Nomi over the last months in bits and spurts. I'm really inspired by all that you've accomplished. And I also want to welcome everybody who's joining us for this webinar program. And of course, our esteemed speakers, Francis Prince and Rabbanit Devorah Evron. Everybody is in for a wonderful treat. If folks would like to connect with JOFA in the United States, our website is www.jofa.org. You can reach me, it's my first name, at jofa.org. And otherwise, I'm going to leave you in wonderful hands. Welcome, everybody. I want to wish you all an early Shabbat Shalom and Hatzlacha for this incredible and inspiring program. And I'm going to join now as a listener. So, Nomi, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Daphne. For those of you that are joining, that was Daphne Lazar-Price, who is the Executive Director of JOFA in the United States, a Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. To give a little bit of an introduction, almost 25 years ago in a living room in New York City, the first ever meeting was held to establish the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. Led by pioneer Blue Greenberg, JOFA was created with the purpose of advocating for increased opportunities for women as religious, spiritual, and halachic leaders, as professional and lay leaders, and as teachers of Talmud and Halacha. And in 2013, the idea went global with the first ever overseas branch of the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance in the UK, started by Rabbanit Devorah, who wanted to boost education and resources on offer to a new generation of Orthodox women in the UK. And very excitingly, in May 2021, JOFA Australia was launched in Melbourne with the first Australian chapter. Since JOFA was established 25 years ago, it has revolutionized the way Orthodox women relate to their tradition. It has a number of halachic guides on topics related to women's involvement in Orthodox Jewish rituals. It has international conferences. One day we can all go when Australia's borders reopen. And it has amazing resources for women, including an interactive app for learning the readings of Megillat Esther and Megillat Ruth, a biannual journal, and lots of resources on its website. So the event tonight is quite special. We have Rabbanit Devorah Evron with us. Rabbanit Evron is the director of Torah Stone's Susi Bradfield Women Institute of Halachic Leadership at Midreshet Lindenbaum, and she is the first female spiritual leader to be appointed at Bar-Ilan University. Rabbanit Devorah Evron is a Morat Halacha, a teacher of Talmud and other Jewish texts, and an active member of Kolech. Interviewing Rabbanit Devorah in conversation is JOFA Australia board member Francis Prince. So Francis is a Jewish educator who taught at Mount Scopus Memorial College in Melbourne for nearly 30 years. She has been an executive member of the Jewish Community Council of Victoria, where she holds the multicultural interfaith portfolios. And Francis also sits on a number of interfaith boards representing the Jewish community, including the Faith Community Council of Victoria. She's also the vice president of the Australian Jewish Historical Society. Francis is a gifted leader, facilitator, and mentor. So this evening promises to be a very interesting conversation. Francis and Rabbanit Evron are going to speak for about 40 minutes. During that time, if you have any questions, feel free to message them to the chat box, and there will be time at the end of the presentation between Francis and Rabbanit Evron to pose any questions. We'll be collating them at the end. So as you go along, feel free to put them in the box, or you could send them to me directly if you'd like. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. That's enough for me, and on to Rabbanit Evron and Francis.
Okay, we ready to start? Okay, thank you. It's really my honor and my pleasure to welcome and introduce Rabbanit Devorah Evron to Australia, so to speak. If we were in a real room, I have no doubt that all the people in our auditorium would rise as you entered the room. As we all know, that is the customary way in which a person steeped in Torah scholarship is greeted. And so I extend our virtual collective standing up to you, Rabbanit Evron.
Thank you.
Now, it's always tempting to, my pleasure, really, an honor. It's always tempting to introduce a speaker via their CV. You know, it gives a long list of qualifications, and it's very long, and it gives the overall direction of a person's academic life. But it also leaves out so much, and that's namely what I see as the all-important journey of getting there. So rather than listing all your many activities and multiple areas of studies, which I'm sure will come out, I would like to begin by focusing on those two current positions, among others, that you presently hold that Nomi mentioned. And I'll just repeat them so everyone can understand. I'd like to start there, where you are now, and then go backwards in time and sort of move forward to how you got there, and then even venture into the future. Where are we going? So your two most recent appointments, especially one just this year, is what has been called spiritual leader, or manhiga ruchanit, at Bar-Ilan University. This is a new position, and Rabbanit Evron is the inaugural holder of this position. The other position, which we've had for a number of years already, is at Midreshet Lindenbaum, which is familiar to many women, especially younger women in our community who have spent time studying there. And you are there as director of Torah Stone, Susi Bradfield's Women's Institute of, and this is where I emphasize, of Halachic leadership. So can we please start those two positions? What do they entail?
So hello, good evening to everyone. Here it's good afternoon. And thank you for having me, and thank you for introducing me. So I do have two current positions. The first is director of the Halachic, the Women's Halachic Institute. That is basically a training program for women to hold halachic positions in education, positions in the community, positions in the public sphere, where there's a need for halachic knowledge and for leadership skills. The women in our program study for 5 years, 4 days a week. So it's like an 80% of the week program. They study and take exams, both written and oral, in all the topics that a man would study and take exams for the title rabbi. And aside those studies, they also have what we call leadership studies, where they go more into depth about relevant subjects that have to do with halakha or parallel or come in contact with halakha. For example, if we study hilchot midah, purity, halachot of purity, then we will also study about sexual abuse and halakha. What is the role of a halachic leader, of a spiritual leader in schools or in communities when they deal with, unfortunately, with sexual abuse and other topics. We'll have pastoral training when we study hilchot of velut, hilchot of mourning, etc. This is my main occupation. It's the main thing that I do during the week, and I actually just came back from one of my students or women or fellows, Brit. She just had a baby boy, so I was there this morning, and it's very exciting to be a part of these women's lives as they train themselves and as they go forward. My other occupation, as you said, is at Bar-Ilan University. I was asked about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I was approached to bring a feminist Torani religious voice to the campus. There's a rabbi on the campus, of course, he's in his 35th year now. And some other universities have rabbis. Not all universities have rabbis in Israel, but some other universities have rabbis. There has never been a woman in a religious leadership position on any campus in Israel. And Bar-Ilan University decided that they want to be the first, they want to lead with this. And they approached me and asked me to come create the position and hold it definitely at the beginning. So I'm really in the process of creating this position and moving it forward. We just had a meeting, a number of people on campus, to summarize the first year, which was a year of learning for me, to understand how the campus works, where are the things that I can come in and do, what can I do? And I am now in the process of building next year's plan, the plan for next year. And so it's very exciting. It's very exciting to start something that did not exist before, such as JOFA Australia, and to really be able to mold it and to bring from my experience, from the experience that we have in Israel, vis-a-vis Jewish feminism and in the entire world. So that's the other occupation, formal occupation that I hold.
Okay, thank you so much. And I can sense, so I think we all can, the excitement of, I guess, trailblazing, but being able to write your own job description and explore what that might look like. There's a lot more we could talk about those, but we'll come back to some of the issues or points that you raised. I'd like to go back to, I guess, your upbringing, your early life, and we'll move forward from there. So could you please tell us something about, your parents, siblings, your family, your upbringing, your religious life, some of the early influences on your life? And I think part of it is your accent, precedes you. So can you please tell us about something about your upbringing? Thank you.
Okay. I'm the eldest of 4 children. I was born in New York, as you can hear. My father was a graduate of Yeshiva University as a doctorate in chemistry. My mother was a graduate of Stern College. She has a doctorate. She has her degree is in English education. And actually, I was born on Erev Rosh Hashanah, in the beginning of her 3rd year at Stern College. So for her 3rd year at Stern, I went to Stern with her. She brought me to Stern. Her sister also studied at Stern, and they built their schedule so that when one had a class, the other didn't. So I didn't go into classes except one that I'll tell you in a minute. But there was 1 hour that they could not schedule that way. And for the first year of my life, I studied English literature with Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, who taught at Stern College. Many years, I was a very good girl and a very good baby, so I didn't make a lot of noise. But many years later, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein chaperoned us, a number of women, I think we were 3 women, to our exam on kashrut that Rav Gigi, who is still head of Yeshivat Har Etzion in Gush Etzion, he gave us the oral exam. So when we came to the yeshiva, we started looking for the rooms, and Rav Lichtenstein saw us and came up to us and said, "I know what you're looking for. Come, I'll show you where the room is." So I was actually very excited. He didn't know, and I didn't tell him, but it was a very meaningful moment for myself. So I was born in the States to Yeshiva University family. And when I was almost 7 years old, today, 52 years ago, we left the States on July 21st, the night that man landed on the moon. We saw it on television. And then we went to the airport and we landed in Israel on the 22nd. So of July, which is today. So today, 52 years ago, we made Aliyah.
So I'll say happy Aliyah anniversary.
Thank
to
you
you.
very much. Thank you very much. My father had told us that making Aliyah would be the most important thing that we do in our lives. That there's a young state that needs us. It's a state that's being built, and it needs us, and that's the most important thing that we do in our lives. And that was something that we were taught from a very young age. That while we have to take care of ourselves and our families and make sure, that we don't fall as a burden to others, it is not enough to just to look at what I need or what my immediate family needs, but that we have a responsibility towards the state of Israel, towards the people of Israel in general, towards all the citizens in the state of Israel, and that's the family that I grew up in. There was the language was not a feminist language, meaning that I wasn't taught by my parents that that there should be a feminist critique or things like that. We were taught that girls as well as boys should aspire to excellence, to that we can do whatever we want. I have a sister who's a professor at the Technion, and very highly regarded in her field. But we were not raised on any feminist theories, or we weren't. The word feminism was not a word that I heard at home, but I did hear it in other places. And from a very young age, I knew that I was a feminist. I think it has to do with reading that I did from a very young age. It really civics always interested me. So civil rights and things like that always interested me. And that was something that I acquired in a young age. I think there were two other things that I'd like to point out if we're talking about my early childhood. And one is that both my grandfathers were rabbis, and three out of four of my great grandfathers, or most of my great grandfathers, were rabbis as well. And while the larger family, when we got together, the men would always sit and talk Torah, and the women would not. I'd always place myself on that border between the women and the men, because I was really interested in what the men were talking about. Only later in life did I realize how important some of the discussions that the women were having actually were. I have to say that very humbly, because when I was a child, and definitely when I was an adolescent growing up, I was not as appreciative of the things they were talking about, but I really wanted to hear what the men were talking about. And my grandfather, who was a Rosh Yeshiva, would not agree to study Torah with me. He wanted to study with my brother. My brother was not interested. But my maternal grandfather, who was a community rabbi, retired community rabbi, did study with me. And eventually, when I graduated high school, I decided that I wanted to learn. And so I had to seek out where to learn, because there were no Midreshet at the time, definitely for Israeli girls. There were some for overseas, like Bradfield, but there were none for Israeli girls. So I looked, and anywhere that I could study, I did. That was one thing that I wanted to talk about. The other thing, excuse me, is that in my elementary school, I went to an all-girls elementary school. They were very proactive in educating us to be active religious girls. Every Rosh Chodesh, the whole school, which was over 800 girls, got together in the auditorium for Tfilat Rosh Chodesh for Hallel that was led by a chazanit with no kedusha, no Torah reading, but very halachic, but also very proactive and led by girls. And I think that was one of the main places that let me know that it's not that being a Jewish religious woman is not being not a man, but it actually there is an essence, there is an existence. There's a lot of meaning to being a religious Jewish religious woman, and that searching for that meaning and making it more broad and more deep is something that is worthy.
Okay, so that let's move forward a little bit. I want to bring into here actually something you said earlier, but I think it's always relevant, is you used the voice about having a feminist Torani voice,
Right.
bringing to campus when we're talking about your job at Bar-Ilan. But it sounds the echoes, if you like, or reverberations of a Torani voice may hark back to that school experience that you have just described. What you call that active. I was going to ask, what does active sort of mean? So you've explained that, but so that term Torani voice, can you explore that a bit further and perhaps link it to what you were talking about with your elementary education?
So it's not a Torani voice, it's a feminist Torani voice. That's because the Torani voice can be any voice of learning Torah, but this is a feminist Torani voice. So I think that the question would be, what happens there when feminism and Torah connect? What derives from that? What new thing is born? So I think that I think about a number of things when I think about what happens when feminism and Torah connect. So one thing is that we explore as feminists and as women, we explore Torah from a point of view where we ask a number of questions. We may ask, where are the women? Where are they? What experience did they have in, for example, Matan Torah, Ma'amad Har Sinai? What experience did they have coming into the land of Israel, where they relate to the land through their paternal lineage or through the husbands that they marry into? And then we hear Bnot Tzlofchad, the daughters of Tzlofchad, that we just read a week and a half and 3.5 weeks ago, their story. So they tell us a little bit about what it feels like, and what they know, and what the reality is. And so you can say maybe it's shelshel fam. We look for these women in Torah, in Mishnah, in Gemara, in medieval times, and etc. and so forth. And we want to know who they were. We want to learn from them. We want to know how others related towards women, etc. So that would be one thing that we look for. Another thing that we look for when feminist critique doesn't only look for the female voices that maybe were not heard. We actually ask ourselves, what other voices were not or are not heard in Torah? And we want to hear them. We want to give space for them. We want to think not in only in a dichotomic way of there's one voice we hear and all the other voices we don't hear, but we want to actually have a variety of voices, of Torah voices heard. So that would be another thing that we look for. And I think that there's another part in feminist Toraniyut or Torani feminism is where we ask the question of leadership. because it's not only where were we, but it's also where are we, and not only where are we, but where do we want Torah to go? Because Torah advances, it's eternal. It advances from the meeting of Torah and the heritage and the generations before us with what happens now. And who's in the conversation influences where Torah is going and what will be happening to Am Yisrael and to what Judaism has to bring to the table. So we want not only to learn about what was, but we want to be a part of what is going on now in order to influence, the future, the present
and the future. Yes, thank you. So let's move into that present a little bit. In terms of your own Torah scholarship, your own Torah learning beyond childhood, I guess, where did you do your learning in terms of formal and informal and so on? And then we'll actually go to your title, Rabbanit. I love saying the word, Rabbanit. It's just, if someone says to me, oh, you're interviewing the Rebbitzin, I'm interviewing the Rabbanit. And it's just, it sings to me, I have to say. So you're learning up till the present time. How do you do that? You have your own chevruta, you have a few of them. But also, if you could talk about the training to be conferred with that title, just an opportunity to say it again, Rabbanit. What did you have to study? What did it entail? What were you examined in? Please take us through some of that.
So as I said, when I finished high school, I wanted to study. I decided to go into the army, actually, which is not so common then among religious girls, but that has to do with my view on how religious people should be more involved in what goes on in the Israeli society as a whole. But before I went to the army, I wanted to study, and there were no places to study. So actually, there was one bet midrash for women, chozrot b'tshuva, for tshuva women, and I went there with a friend of mine. They allowed us to use their bet midrash and to participate in any of the classes that we wanted, because they realized that we knew actually much more than the other women that were there. So I was there for about 2.5, 3 months. It was like going into a cave and just being nourished by this. And that's where we studied. We had a chavruta in a number of things, not Gemara yet, but other things like Torah, Tanakh, and Mishnah, and Mesilat Yesharim, Kuzari, Rambam, and then I went into the army. And even when I was in the army, I continued learning wherever I could. I made sure that I had a chavruta and continued studying. And then when I finished the army, I went to Bar-Ilan University, and I was in one of the first years of the Midreshet Bar-Ilan. Bar-Ilan, it added to my school load, but I was actually very happy to do that. And that's where for the first time, I studied Gemara at the Midrashah. And then I graduated and got married and went to live on kibbutz. My husband is from kibbutz, where I continued to have a chavruta. My sister-in-law is a great chavruta. She actually, starting August, will be the first female head of the kibbutz dati movement, and she'll actually be the first female head of any kibbutz movement in Israel. So that's another feminist religious leader. So we studied together, and I had other chavrutot, and I also taught. I taught junior high and then in the high school. So whenever you prepare a lesson, you learn. And I made sure to give lessons on kibbutz. And then we moved up north. We now live up north in Mitzpenet Tofa in the Lower Galilee. And my track went a little in a different direction. I'm a psychodrama therapist. And I worked in a psychiatric ward for adolescents for about 10 years. And so throughout my adult life, I had one leg in therapy and one leg in Torah learning. At a certain point, I got my master's in gender studies and started working in a Midreshet Lindenbaum, which is one of the pluralist Batei Midrash, and I was head of Nigun Nashim, which is a Bet Midrash for religious and non-religious women. So I continued teaching, and then at a certain point, I decided that I really want to do what I wanted to do all along, and that is study halacha. This is from a very young age. We're not going to go into this, but I really wanted to study halacha, and there were no programs that were training morot halacha, definitely not up north. In Jerusalem, there were two programs. One is the program that I head today, which is WHL, but I couldn't travel to Jerusalem for 4 days a week, as I do now. My kids were younger, and I couldn't do it then. But Bet Morasha in Jerusalem had a program that was called Tochnit Halacha Lenashim, the Halacha program for women. I had an interview. I had to show that I was fluent in Gemara, but I had never had formal Gemara education. All my Gemara education, all the years that I studied Gemara, all were informal. Luckily, my husband knows Gemara very well. He's on his third cycle of Daf Yomi. He teaches twice a day. He's a chemical engineer, but he knows Gemara.
In his spare time.
I had a very in his spare, yes. So I had a very good chavruta and teacher, and I still have whenever, if ever I need. But so I came to the interview, and they examined me and asked me questions, and realized that I'm from a generation where the only way to study was by yourself and making sure. So I was accepted to the program. It was a 6-year program, 1 day a week. I prepared at home. My Shabbos table was open throughout the week. There were Gemarot on the table and other books on the table. Only Friday afternoon, I would put all the Gemarot away, set the table, and then Shabbat afternoon, again, the table was with Gemarot. This was the main thing that I did alongside working, of course. And we studied Ilchot Shabbat, Kashrut, Nida, purity, Avilut, mourning, Even Ezer, which is marriage and fertility, halachot, and Yom Tov and Chol HaMoed. And we had written and oral exams by very prominent rabbis. As I mentioned, by Rav Gigi, for example, who's head of Halachic, Rav Eliezer Melamed from the settlement of Har Bracha, who writes the Pninei Halacha, that I understand is being translated now into English. So very, very prominent and leading rabbis in the field. And I was given a certificate of a Morat Halacha. So here the title is really interesting. We can move to the title, right? I think I gave
sure can. Yes.
my resume, my Torah learning resume. The title is very interesting because none of the institutes that train Morot Halacha or Yoatzot Halacha give a title of Rabbanit. The title of Rabbanit is actually something that the community gives or started to give a few years ago to knowledgeable Torah women, to women that they knew, that they studied and took exams and teach. Because every male is called Rav, even if he didn't complete everything, but he's teaching already and he's known as being knowledgeable. So they started calling the women Rabbanit.
Who's they? Who's the they?
The people in the community. I'll tell you a story. Okay, I'll tell you a story. Here in Midreshet Lindenbaum, as I'm sure in other places that you know, we read Megillat Esther. And we started reading it in someone's house, yada, yada, yada. We read it in the main sanctuary of the shul. And about 8 or 10 years ago, I stand on the bima next to the person that reads. I'm the one that makes sure that everybody's quiet, that everything goes according to halacha. So I was trying to get everyone to silent down, and women were silent down, but there was this one woman who kept on talking. So her 5-year-old daughter said out loud, "Ima, be quiet. Rabbi Devorah wants to say something. Ima, ti b'sheket, Rabbanit Devorah rotza la'agid mashu." Yeah, Rabbanit Devorah wants to say something. So those are the people that are giving us the titles, meaning that we're recognized by the community. That's how it started. And then we realized that this was something important, not because of our achievements, but because we wanted this voice of Torah to be taken seriously. This is a voice, hopefully, humbly, I have to say this, because we have to recognize that that none of us are prophets, and we don't. I can't say, oh yes, this is 100%, but we do the learning, etc., and we want to bring the voice of Torah. So so they started to recognize that we started to recognize that we need to acknowledge this. So we started calling each other. And then the organization of Bet Hillel, which is the first Orthodox, there's one in the States and there's one in Israel, Orthodox organization that has men and women. We call all the men rabbi and we call all the women rabbanit. And this is because in the modern Orthodox community in Israel, the wife of the rabbi is actually not really called Rabbanit, specifically because they didn't want that job. They don't want the job of the Rebbetzin. They want, it's fine that their husband wants to be a rabbi. That's great. They'll support them, but they want to be something else: doctors, attorneys, teachers, stay-at-home moms, whatever they want to be. So the title was like empty, and that's how this title was filled with this new process. So as I said, we don't give the title of Rabbanit. We give the title of Morat Halacha, Morat Torah, V'Maniga Ruchanit, and spiritual leader. But the women are called already by everyone Rabbanit.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. It also, to me, it's a recognition by one's peers and one's community. It feels very, very democratic to me, and I guess that purposefulness of the community in recognizing that, both your own community, when you talk about Bet Hillel, it's sort of peers, but it's also for everybody else around you. It's really very inspiring. Let me turn back or continue with the Morat Halacha. What are you allowed to do, entitled to do halachically, or institutionally or politically, however you want to say that, and what are you not? Like what is new in what you might be doing in your day-to-day life, and where perhaps at this stage are there limits?
I can answer questions, the halacha questions that are put to me, because the people that ask me want my answer. Of course, I must be responsible. There are things that I know how to answer by myself. There are things that I have to read more or consult with other rabbis or rabbaniyot, but it's my responsibility to give that answer. I can write halachic articles. I can speak or teach. Actually, it's anyone that invites me. That's where I can, voice what they invited me for. I can also, say my opinion publicly, even if I'm not invited to do so. But I can speak up. I can speak up also because I studied, and also because I'm empowered by studying. So I feel inside that I can speak up, and also because once you went through this process and you're recognized by the community and by the public, then they ask for your voice, and also if you want to speak out, so it's not surprising that you can speak out. One of the women that just graduated my program, Rabbanit Mirvis, is now head of a community. So she can give shiurim, she can answer questions, be on the board to make policy. She does not count for a minyan. She's not a shliach tzibur. The shul is Orthodox. I'm trying to think of what else she cannot. And anything that has to do that halachically is only male are the things that she cannot do. I'm not a community rabbi, so I don't feel those limitations, but yeah.
Okay, which I guess springboard us to the present and moving to the future is really, how do you see the evolving role of Orthodox learned women, and just what might the future look like, and politically, institutionally, individually, and what might have to happen for that future to be actualized?
So I'm really an optimist. I see, how should I put it? Women will be more involved in Jewish leadership. We see it already. This is going to be all over the world. It's not only in Israel or in North America, or women are already more involved in Jewish life, in schools, definitely. And they are going to be more and more involved in communities and in synagogues, in shuls. I have no doubt that.
Can I ask you to expand on your word involved? Can we explore that a bit further?
So involved, I mean a part of where policy is being decided on, part of the leadership of communities and schools, etc. And they will also be the go-to person in many things in Jewish life, for knowledge, for halacha, etc. I know this to be true because the more we learn and the more we know, the more we are accessed, the more people come to us. I think that communities need to be led by a number of voices and genders, and need to be led by both men and women. We are now opening in overseas halacha mastery, halacha scholars program. There are 2 young women from Australia, from Melbourne, that will be part of this program. And the more women know, and women, the more they're going to be approached by men and women, not only by women. So this is a process that is happening and will continue to happen, and will and will expand Torah, and it's great. It is. It is.
Yeah,
It's great.
yeah.
So,
What about
yeah?
before, just as part of how you see this coming about, I can't help but thinking about that. I'm not saying it's not changing, it is, but most women begin this sort of study behind the 8 ball of males their own age.
Right. Yes.
And we all sort of say, we can never catch up. Is that really true? We can never catch up? And how important is that? Because we always say that among ourselves, oh, he can never catch up. Is that a truth or truism? I'm not sure.
Okay, yes and no. Yes and no. There are things that we can't catch up, because when you study a language, and Gemara and Halacha are a language, and when you study them at an earlier age, then you know more, you understand more words, you understand the logic of the language, etc. And so what we are starting to see is schools that girls even start Gemara at the same time as boys, and high schools, definitely in the co-ed high schools in the States, you see it more. And then young women that go to Midreshet, etc. So on the one hand, yes, it's something that we need to start learning at a younger age. That's one thing, but no, because we bring other things to the table. There are things that men can't catch up to what we learned, because we just grow up differently. It's a different upbringing, so we see things that they don't see. And that helps us when we come to study a sugya in the Gemara, a topic in the Gemara. We come with fresh eyes. We come from different points of view. So, and this is what I talk about. This is what I mean when I say expanding. Here's a question, like what? I'm curious about examples. So I'll give you an example. When you're not brought in, when you're said that when you're supposed to, you're not counted, you're not part of the main group, and you understand what that means, that then when there's a halachic discussion about young boys with special needs, can they at their bar mitzvah be counted as part of the minyan? You bring a different point of view to that halachic discussion. Even though you're not going to be counted as part of the minyan, you're talking about young boys, but you bring a different perspective. And when that different perspective is translated into halachic rules and halachic language, then you can influence the outcome from your own personal perspective. Excuse me.
Take it. So, just while you catch your breath, I guess what you're talking about is the development of halacha may go in, I don't know about completely different directions. By nature, that's not what we're looking at, but in different directions and veering offs, having more and more women involved.
Yeah, but that's what halacha always did. I mean, think about how the invention of the print influenced halachic discourse. It helped halacha to go into even a different way, or technology, or the meeting of East and West in Israel, the establishment of the state of Israel influenced halacha. So now feminism is influencing halacha. And that's the beauty of halacha, that even though it's influenced, it at the one hand keeps its core structure and values, but it brings into that core structure whatever is going on, and then it continues to develop, and that's the secret of its eternity. Because if it was not, if it was only rigid, then it would be irrelevant. And if it was always flexible, then it wouldn't hold that core thing that connects us through the generations. But because it's dialectical, it has both, that's what makes it eternal.
Thank you. I think we might stop at that beautiful point and we might take some questions, but I'm going to reserve the right to finish our sort of conversation with an extract from the letter that Professor Amnon Olbeck, the rector of Bar-Ilan, that he wrote when he informed the student body of your position. And I'd actually like to read just a small extract that really says so much, and even more so now. I was thinking, do I start with this or finish it? But I think it's better now that we've all heard from you. The Bar-Ilan University administration has appointed Rabbanit Devorah Evron to serve as a woman's voice for a large community of Bar-Ilan men and women who are eager to hear a feminine voice as part of their spiritual world. And I think those students are very, very lucky.
Thank you.
Chaya Hirschberg will formally thank you, but I'd like to give other people a chance. Now, I have some questions here that have been sent by the audience. Okay, this one is from our own local wonderful Rabbanit Elise Borgi. Could you please reflect how your skills and training in theatre therapy have impacted on your learning and teaching of Torah?
Thank you so much, Rabbanit, for that question. Psychodrama is a way of looking at the world, and in the training, we're trained also as interpersonal relations and one-on-one, and also group therapy. It's a very group-oriented therapy. So it taught me to look deep into situations, and it gave me certain skills of how to ask questions. And when someone comes with a halachic question that is more than my milchik spoon fell into the fleishik soup, what should I do? But if I'm asked a question by a young woman who's trying to become pregnant and is having problems with tevilah and with midah, etc., in order for me to give her an answer, I really need to understand the situation that she's in. And this skill of asking questions from therapy really helps. It's like it's a little bit like a detective, but in order to listen not only to the facts but also to the person. So that's one thing that I think that I got from these skills. The other thing is that, interestingly enough, it happens a lot that a certain rabbi or rabbanit specializes in a topic. And the topic that I've found myself dealing with more and more over the years is Hilchot Avelut. I write about Hilchot Avelut. I train specifically in Hilchot Avelut.
The laws of mourning. I'm just
yes,
mourning.
Of mourning, and so I think that is a place where my therapeutic personality and training and my halachic training meet, and so that also is there.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Someone has asked, you spoke about how women read our Jewish texts through a particular lens. could you please give one or two examples of how a woman's perspective might lead to a new or fresh perspective on, what has been written to date by men?
So I think I can. I'll try to give two examples. One is it has to do only with the learning. For example, when you read Parashat Vayeshev, that talks about the story of Yehuda and Tamar, most of the commentary looks at it from the point of view of Yehuda as the hero of the story, and all the other are, he's the protagonist, and all the other are the counter protagonists, and it's his story. But when you read it as a woman, or even not only as a woman, when you read it from a feminine point of view, a man can also read from a feminine point of view, and a woman can read from a masculine point of view. When you read it from a feminine point of view, and you want to ask yourself, what is the story of Tamar? What is she going through? Then you have a whole new variety of commentary. This would also happen when you read, for example, Parashat Sotah, which is the parsha in Sefer Bamidbar that talks about a man that is suspicious of his wife, and he can take her to Jerusalem and to make sure that she was faithful to him. So there's a view of commentary not only in Tanakh, in Talmud, like if you study the laws of yichud, of being alone, a man and a woman that are not married, when they can they be alone or not? So that's a whole new perspective. Another question would be, I'll give you a very quick example. In our exam in Chot Shabbat, our oral exam in Chot Shabbat, Rav Eliezer Melamed asked us, what is our halachic opinion about a doula, a woman who supports, a woman who gives birth. That's what it's called in Hebrew. I don't know what it's called in English.
It's an international term now.
Okay, so what do you think about a doula traveling on Shabbat, driving on Shabbat to assist another woman that's giving birth? Is she like a doctor? Is she not like a doctor? What do you think? And the discussion was very, very interesting, because he told us at the end, he said, I never realized how important the doula could be for some women. Maybe for some women not, but for some women, she could make or break the process. So here was another perspective that had halachic ramifications on the answer.
Thank you for those two wonderful examples. I have a question here. It's probably going to be the last one. I think it's probably more of a political sort of question. And the question is about how to break through, I guess, some of the institutional barriers around. And I guess this, I don't know who asked the question, was asking about with the appointment of Rabbanit Devorah in Efrat, not everyone's happy, let's put it that way. And this person who put the question is sort of, I guess, also lamenting some of the issues that have happened here in Melbourne, some of the pushback, if you like. And I guess sort of from your point of view, how was the best way for us, for women, to deal with those sorts of responses and reactions?
So first of all, I'm really sorry about the places that had setbacks, because in Israel, there were no setbacks, which is really interesting. It was even in the most conservative, Orthodox conservative circles, we really didn't have a lot of critique or pushback on this, which is really interesting. Overseas, there was. So first of all, I think that if you really want to talk about it, you need to know all the details. For example, Rabbanit Mirvis was actually this is a process that's been going on for 3 years. For 3 years. She, for 3 years, has been part of their board, of their committee. She's been giving all the shiurim, speaking before Tkiyot on Rosh Hashanah, giving the shiur of Shabbat Gadol before Pesach, answering halacha questions. She herself, when the COVID pandemic started, she herself was sick for 3 weeks. She didn't get it lightly at all. And then when she recovered, a few months after she recovered, she went into training in Shaarei Tzedek Hospital to be a volunteer on the Corona ward. And she's a woman who has been a leader for years. And the community decided that they want her to be their leader. So I think that when you know these facts, this is something that you can talk about, and you can say, wait a minute, this is not just a political thing that happened. This is a step in a process that's been going on for a long time. And the truth is that the way to make social change is first of all to be very respectful of the present and of where people are and where the community is. And it's not, you have to realize that this is something that people feel comfortable with where they are. But there are things that many people don't see that are needed and that are lacking. So when you're a part of the community, it's like pacing and leading in therapy. You start walking alongside the community and bringing in whatever the community needs and wants and whatever the community feels comfortable with. And then slowly you start doing a little more. And then it'll feel right for the community. You really need to educate yourself. You have to be knowledgeable, etc. But you have to be very geared towards where the community is, where the people are. But that's what a leader does. You can't just run ahead. If you run ahead, you may get there first, but you won't have anyone following you. You have to walk at the pace that is right for the community and slowly take larger steps. And I just want to say one last thing. Feminist change is an outcome of sisterhood. Do not work by yourself. You're part of JOFA, which is great. JOFA is an international sisterhood. JOFA is also connected to Kolech, which is like our Israeli Orthodox Feminist Alliance. We work together. And when we work together, then we also support each other, but we also learn from each other. And we can help each other even in the process of thinking and deciding what we want to do. And never, never, never allow anyone to tell you that what you're doing is not enough or it's too little. Anything you do is great. It's great. This process is an ongoing process, just as Judaism is ongoing. There are many things that I may, want to see today that will happen years after I'm gone. But this is a privilege to be a part of this wonderful, wonderful process and sisterhood of Orthodox women that are taking responsibility for Torah and for their Torah life.
Thank you. Thank you so much personally for me. And I'd like to introduce another board member of JOFA Australia, Chaya Hertzberg, who will officially thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Rabbanit Evron, and thank you so much, Francis and Rabbanit, for that wonderful conversation. Rabbanit Evron, it has truly been an honor to have you here on Zoom, sharing your wisdom and story to a mainly Australian audience and some of our friends from around the world. I myself attended Midreshet Lindenbaum, and I have to say that perhaps the most inspiring aspect of my experience was sitting next to the women you now lead in the Bet Midrash, learning Torah and studying Halacha seriously and contributing to that Halachic conversation. So thank you so much for being our guest here tonight, for your strong, sensitive and collaborative leadership, or as you put it, for leading the sisterhood. I would also like to thank everyone who has joined this conversation, listening and contributing questions. We, so speaking on behalf of the JOFA board, have been incredibly excited and blown away by the reception JOFA Australia has received in the past few months since our launch. There are two initiatives I should remind you all about. Firstly, we are taking applications and nominations for our Speakers Bureau, which will be a database resource for the community to easily identify women who can speak and present in Orthodox spaces. So if that sounds like you or your friend, please get in touch. You can find the sign up form on our socials. Secondly, we are creating a Kaddish mentorship program. So please email us at jofaAUS@jofa.org if you are a woman who has said Kaddish in shul and wish to be a mentor, or if you are in a position to say Kaddish in shul and feel you might benefit from the guidance of a woman who has been in that position before you. To stay across our events and advocacy, please follow JOFA Australia on Facebook and JOFA AUS on Instagram. So thank you again, Rabbanit Evron. This really has been such a treat. Everyone else, see you soon. Stay well if you are in lockdown, and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you and Shabbat Shalom.